The following paid program is furnished by Coalition Radio. It's for basic entertainment and informational purposes only and is solely responsible for its content. It does not necessarily reflect the views of Cumulus Media, its management, or its staff.
Good evening. You're listening to the Coalition on AM Talk Radio, AM 790. Your source for news, information, and everything that matters about politics and social issues today. We've got a very special evening lined up tonight. Joining us in studio later on in the show will be Ken Block, Republican candidate for governor. Joining us on the earlier part of the show, we'll have Mark Hyden in from conservatives concerned about the death penalty. Tony Jones back with us as a special guest this week.
Great to be back here with you, P.O. I feel like I'm back home. My keys to the building still worked after all these weeks. I couldn't believe it.
That's funny. Mine didn't. I don't know if I should take that personally. Tony, as you know, you're going to be in the studio occasionally. How's the campaign going?
It's going well. I am laying back a little bit between now and the primary. Then after these guys slaughter themselves to the primary, that's when I'll do a big push between the primary and the general election. But I'm going around, I'm talking to small business people, so I'm going to a lot of Chamber of Commerce events. They're kind enough to invite me. I'm kind enough to show up, and I'm hearing the regulatory horror stories from the small business guys. They are trying to set up their business, and they're getting pushback from the Secretary of State's office and their local town council every step along the way. And it's eye-opening to me to hear the horror stories that these poor people are going through just trying to open the doors.
You know, I worked in a small business. I've helped run small businesses. I've even owned a small business in this state. And if people are successful in this state, it's despite the best efforts of the state. I always joke you either work for the state or you work out of state. And unfortunately, that doesn't seem to be getting easier. I remember just a few years ago when the Sales Tax Commission went out and I guess over a period of about 48 hours closed, hundreds of thousands of businesses across the state because we were going to show them. And, summarily executed people financially. You have to wonder at what point, is there a tipping point? Do you get any sense of that, Tony?
Well, the thing that I find the most interesting is the fact that when you look down to the nitty-gritty, a lot of these laws, they don't, quote-unquote, protect anybody in that it seems like they're just a way to generate revenue. You know, there's an extra tax, there's an extra fee. But if you look down, there's really no reason that these should be in place. There's no protection of the consumer or protection of the business person themselves. It's just an excuse to extort money from people at some of these junctures.
Well, understand something. Under the current operating mode, and we're going to talk about this a lot during the show tonight, people need to understand that government in Rhode Island looks upon themselves as the means to the end, that ultimately small businesses exist really as an inconvenient source of funding for these people. You are not a citizen of the state of Rhode Island. You are actually a revenue opportunity. You are nothing more than a human barcode waiting to be scanned as many times, and your worth as a citizen is deemed as how many times they can cross-reference you and scan you across the revenue threshold. So, with that in mind, I mean, you look to the atrocities this week with this newly discovered, bid process. I'm not sure what I was more appalled by, the notion that a sitting state representative would be bidding on something for an organization. That they would have. I mean, folks are overcomplicating this issue. They're talking about the whole process. Did he bid? Did he know? What order did they do it in? Ultimately, it's very, very simple. You're bidding on a job from an agency that ultimately you have some level of budgetary control over. That's it. There's no other there. That's why you have to determine at what point you're going to stop every level of involvement with state elected officials and doing business with the state. I mean, what else is there to think about? And ultimately, if these folks say, well, how am I supposed to make a living? Okay, there's a very simple solution. You were elected as a citizen patriot, as a volunteer, as someone who is going to help lives, not attempt to get one. So if at that point in time it's no longer financially viable for you to continue to be a state legislator, step aside.
And by the way, it's just going back a little bit, and it's not just because they are kind enough to invite me to their events, and it's not just because they've given me all the possible free coffee and donuts that I could possibly imbibe, but these Chamber of Commerces, they really are, as a libertarian, as a voluntarist, it's great to see these guys coming together voluntarily, the businessmen's associations, the Main Street associations, they kind of understand my message and the libertarian message, but they really do, as you like to say, P.O., do the work of the Lord.
Well, that's it. And right now, if you own a business in Rhode Island, that's about the only thing you're getting is the Lord. Hopefully, we've got on the air right now. We've got Mark Hyden. Now, Mark, are you out there tonight?
I am. Thanks for having me on your show.
Mark, this is something I've been looking forward to for quite a while. We had scheduled Mark originally a month or so ago. I got caught in Chicago. Mark was kind enough to come back to us. Mark is with an organization called Conservatives Concerned About the Death Penalty. I tripped over them, if you will, in a well-written piece about Mark in the New York Times, because as a libertarian, not a conservative Republican, but as a libertarian, one of the issues that we constantly struggle with is the involvement of government in day-to-day life, particularly how it affects the criminal justice system. And as a libertarian, I can't stomach the notion, and I'm stepping aside from the moral aspects of the death penalty for just a moment here, all right, for purposes of this show. It's difficult to me imagine myself as a conservative wanting the state to be involved ultimately in a question over life over death. And so, Mark, tell us about your organization, how you had your, come to Jesus moment, if you will, and got involved, and just give us a background of what you guys are trying to accomplish.
Well, as a son of a preacher, come to Jesus moment means a little bit different to me. But I actually used to support the death penalty. For a long time, I thought it was very appropriate, and I actually had a lot of faith in the state to get it right, and I didn't. I kind of closed my eyes to the abuses and the misuse that we see so often from the government in certain programs. And I tell people that when I look at a policy, I try to give it what I call the conservative litmus test to see if it aligns with my principles. And I think a conservative policy should be constitutional, it should be pro-life, it should be fiscally responsible, and it should be a limited government. And the death penalty is clearly and at least inconsistent with 3 out of 4 of those. It runs a real risk of killing innocent people. Already more than 140 individuals have been wrongly convicted and released from death row. We don't actually know how many innocent people may have been executed because the criminal justice system doesn't operate that way. And it's far more expensive than life without parole, and there's many instances that we can point out where it actually caused the cardinal conservative sin. It led to tax increases. And, I'm more of a traditional conservative, and I think it was Ronald Reagan that said that libertarianism is at the heart of conservatism. So in that respect, I suppose we're philosophical siblings. So when I say that, I think we can talk about limited government. There's something about giving an error-prone government the power to kill its citizens. That's not a very smart decision to do, and it's clearly not limited government. So that's why I started to move away from the death penalty, from my support. But I believe the death knell, no pun intended, for me, was finding out that it doesn't even deter murder. So we have this high fiscal and high human cost, and we really don't get anything out of it, and that just didn't make any sense to me.
At first blush, of course, remember, you're speaking to someone in the greater Boston area, and are you alleging that the same fine folks who brought us the big dig might not be capable of orchestrating or managing properly a capital punishment?
Well, I think certainly you can make a compelling argument for that.
Yeah, it's talk about, if you will, one of the great divisive issues in conservatives and in the Republican Party at large is, of course, what's euphemistically referred to as the life movement. You've got organizations like NARAL banging against the conservative Republicans constantly for not upholding Roe v. Wade or attempting to turn down Roe v. Wade. You've got a passionate group within the Republican conservative movement who is anti-abortion. Yet at first blush, some of these same folks embrace the death penalty. Do you see an issue there?
I don't, and we're seeing many of those people actually getting on board with us. You can look at Abby Johnson, who used to work for Planned Parenthood, but she's now an anti-abortion activist and a strong conservative, and she opposes the death penalty because of her consistent life ethic. Now, I like to remind a lot of my friends and some of the left that I come into contact with that there are actually many different flavors of pro-life, whether it's pro-life for all sentient beings or for all life from the cradle or conception to natural death, or just pro-innocent life. And I submit to you that the death penalty, because it risks killing innocent life, because of the fallibility of man, it's inconsistent with any of the pro-life flavors out there. And we're seeing a lot of people that are worried about life slowly but surely coming out against the death penalty.
How has your project been at the state level? You know, you've obviously got states like Texas, which have become notorious and near synonymous with the culture of death. You know, we're going to come back to the break, after the break in a moment, but I want you to close on that. What, on a practical level, folks can do, A, to get involved and become more aware of your organization, and at the same time, how it's working out for you. You're listening to the Coalition on Talk Radio, AM 790. We'll be back in just a moment.
Manchester 65 is New England's newest live music and events venue. If you're not completely enjoying your current live music experience, there is another option. Manchester 65 is large enough to support touring acts, yet small enough for that local feel. For upcoming events, go to manchester65.com. Make it your place. manchester65.com.
ProvidenceNightOut.com is a one-stop destination website where you'll discover a comprehensive guide of everything that the Providence area has to offer. Nightlife, entertainment, dining and dancing, community and family events, and so much more. Download the free app called My Night Out. It's ProvidenceNightOut.com.
Mike's Professional Tree Service offers top-of-the-line tree removal, trimming, stump grinding, stump removal, and so much more. Mike's Professional Tree Service will do everything to safeguard your home and property and is fully licensed and insured. Call them today at 401-823-7485 for a free estimate on tree service, tree removal, trimming, and tree care. That's 401-823-7585. Mike's Professional Tree Service are the tree experts serving all of Rhode Island. Online at mikesprotree.com. That's mikesprotree.com. Midday Records is a label that is comprised of local artists and exists for the sole purpose of helping other local artists find new opportunities and to help build a more thriving New England music scene. Midday Records hosts the area's fastest-growing music-related networking event, the Midday Social, books Midday Records presents shows throughout New England, releases compilations featuring local music, promotes bands through the Midday blog, are the co-founders of Music for Pause, and has recently started an artist development and management division. Stay up to date with Midday Records by checking them out on your favorite social media site like Facebook and Twitter, and find them online at middayrecords.com. That's middayrecords.com.
Yankees baseball on AM 790 Talk and Business.
Pitch is lined to left center field. It is a base hit. Roberts comes in to score. Ball game over. Yankees win.
Catch all the action all season long from pregame to postgame as the Yankees do battle to win the East and get back to the postseason.
The Yankees win.
The Yankees at the Red Sox, a 7:20 pregame tonight on AM 790.
Welcome back to the Coalition. AM 790, your source for talk, news, and business. You can find the Coalition on Facebook.com/Coalition Radio, or you can find us at www.coalitionradio.us. I want to finish a few thoughts here with Mark Hyden from Conservatives Concerned About the Death Penalty. Mark, welcome back.
Thank you much.
I wanted to talk about what people can do practically. You know, have you had success on the ground at the state level in places like Texas in sort of changing the hearts and minds?
I've actually had many public speaking opportunities in Texas, as well as many other red states. You can see, looking legislatively, that Kansas is one of the red states that I believe is getting close to repealing the death penalty. Nebraska, last legislative session, almost had enough votes to repeal it. So we're seeing that a lot of these red states are seeing that the death penalty is more expensive, so it doesn't make sense, and it risks life. So it's just not worth it to keep on the book. And the grassroots are really getting involved. North Carolina, for instance, they rolled out their own statewide conservatives concerned about the death penalty group. And we're seeing this happen sporadically in different states. So there's a real concern from the grassroots level, but we see there's a concern from the grass tops level because people like Colonel Oliver North is against the death penalty. People like Jay Sekulow against the death penalty, and Dr. Ron Paul, who endorsed our goals, is against the death penalty. There's real reasons to be concerned, and we're starting to see the successes of the grassroots and grass tops coming together.
Well, I guess the beauty, too, of what you're talking about is that it's being done at the legislative level, not by judicial fiat.
Absolutely. I mean, I think the conservative and probably the libertarian preference would to see it repealed on a state-by-state legislative basis. I believe in the 10th Amendment. I believe in keeping government local. So that would be my preference.
How can people find out more about your organization, Mark?
Go to conservativesconcerned.org. We have a lot of information, fact sheets, quotes from different thought leaders who are with us. And if you want to talk to me directly, I welcome that. And my email address is info@conservativesconcerned.org.
Great. Well, again, thanks for coming on. We hope we're going to hear periodic updates from you and your organization, particularly about your successes and maybe some of the challenges that you've run into. Mark, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Tony, what do you think?
Well, to break it down to the micro level a little bit, don't forget about Jeffrey Scott Hornoff in Warwick, who was sentenced to life for a murder he didn't commit. Now, he was a police officer. He had the best defense, and with a little bit of DNA testing a little bit later on, it was found out that he was, in fact, not guilty. Now, what if we had, luckily, we're talking about this off the air a little bit, it's a little bit of a moot issue for us being a local show because Rhode Island doesn't have the death penalty, but what if, in this case, there was a death penalty?
Right, and as a result, we talked off radio. As someone a lot smarter than me once said, that public policy should not come from personal tragedy, and so every now and then, would it be Woodmansey or whatever, there is a call for it. I think we just have to be ready with logic and clear thinking to keep that off the books, if you were. Well, this is a very special moment for the Coalition Talk Radio. We're privileged to have in studio on the air with us Ken Block. Ken, welcome to the show.
Good afternoon.
Right, Ken's been everywhere. You need to, as the potential Republican nominee for the gubernatorial race here in Rhode Island. Ken, first, let me congratulate your campaign. And one of the reasons why I want to congratulate your campaign, even though I'm supposed to maintain some level of independence here, is your overall accessibility. When I look across the 5 or 6 campaigns that are going on right now in Rhode Island, I see a few things. From your folks on the other side of the aisle, I see campaigns sort of hidden by buzzwords, by cliches, hiding behind craftily
hot wives.
Hot wives. Craftily.
My wife is quite hot. Thank you very much.
Carefully crafted PR campaigns. Talking points. I mean, there's an entire series of proposals being floated by the Democratic opposition that have no basis in reality, no clear availability of funding. Where we've got a running pool here at the coalition when the General Treasurer is going to announce a legislative study on Pizza Fridays at local high schools, and when she's going to in fact promise that there will be no more homework on weekends. That's how out of touch the Democratic Party is. Then I look at your Republican primary opponent, and I'm convinced at this point that he's in some dark room muttering in a numinescent tone of voice, block. Ken Block, as if somehow you have personally prevented his coronation as a Republican candidate. So congratulations on that, because you're out there, you're doing the regular conventional media, you're with folks like us as independent media players, you're out there in the print media, you're out there on discussing with people on the websites. You've become the issues candidate. You seem to be the only candidate clinging to this sort of far-flung thought that maybe issues matter.
Issues matter. It drives me crazy when I'm on a debate stage and I hear the 3 Democrats. First of all, they all sound the same, right? It's really hard. If you neutralize their voices so you couldn't tell them apart based on how they sound, you couldn't tell them apart based on what they're saying. I mean, they're identical and they're empty. It's rather shocking to me because it's widely acknowledged that Rhode Island's in serious trouble, and the only way you get out of trouble like we're in is with solid plans that people can assess and see that they're viable, and there isn't one. I mean, every Democrat says they're going to fix the roads and the bridges, but they have no idea where the money comes from.
Right. I mean, they're hiding behind carefully crafted media personas as opposed to addressing really what is a crisis situation. I don't know if anyone in the general electorate, you have to wonder, particularly in the media, if anyone gets that.
Yeah, there are people who do. There are certainly people who do. Neil, who's in the room with us here today, is with me a lot of the time when we're traipsing all over the state, and we both hear this a lot from people. You know, they'll come up to me and just say, "You're the only guy that makes any sense. You're the only guy who's got solutions to the problems, and you have my vote." You know, I hear that across the political spectrum. The one that always amuses the two of us a lot is when someone comes up and says, "You know, I'm a lifelong Democrat, and I've never voted for anybody but Democrat in my life. But you know, you have the answers. I'm voting for you." You know, and it's like a confessional, and it's great. I mean, you know, I've been always been about getting into government for one reason and one reason only. That's to fix the problems that are broken in this state. I think it's been decades since we've had a leader step up, enunciate a clear and understandable, not only a vision, but a plan to correct the problems that we have. And I have that. And I can't wait to dive into it more deeply with you here as much as time will permit us. But, you know, the emptiness that surrounds this campaign is nuts. And I think it turns people off to politics.
Well, one of the mantras here at the coalition is that we don't handicap elections. And, you know, we often will say, we're not interested in your fundraising. We're not interested in what type of polling you're doing. We're not interested in whether you will win. We want to know why you should. And in under that same context, it would appear to me that a lot of people, particularly in the media, are missing the big picture. Technically, the big picture, as far as they're concerned, is who will win the election. To me, that's the battle. The war to be won is who will effectively provide governance on a going-forward basis here in the state of Rhode Island. As you mentioned, that's something we've sorely missed. I think we spoke before the show, and I think we all agree that the last governor that seemed to get that had the vision thing, as the Bushies would say, was Bruce Sunland. And you're going back an entire generation at that point. That was technically, last century? Yeah. So I want to talk about, in one sense, the electoral process, not handicapping it, but really talk about the management style that's typically evolved from the Republican Party. You know, if you go back in history, there seems to be two approaches the Republicans have taken to coming up with a party nominee and ultimately a governor. The first approach is to take a lifetime political official, someone who's risen up from the trenches, whether it be from the city council up through a mayoral position or above, and has spent a lifetime in sort of pitched battle with the Democrats. Now, remember, of course, we all know, and it's going to become almost cliche, that we're operating in one sense in a single-party state. And we've seen, whether it be an Ed DePreet or a Lincoln Almond, just how well that's worked out. There's been considerable disappointment. The other sort of cliched response has been that we're going to elect a businessman, because businessmen are going to run government like a business, and they're going to be successful because they're going to look at it like a business. Well, one need only go back to the last Republican administration, Don Carcieri, a gentleman, a well-meaning individual, to see what an utter failure that was. Top-down management, when you don't have the assent or the contractual assent of the people that you're managing, simply doesn't work. And in that theory, that's how we ended up with the 38 studios or a Cape Wind or whatever, because ultimately you had an autocratic leader handing down the dictates of what was going to be, and everybody just sort of followed along. I want to talk about your background. After the break, you come from a collaborative business model. You come from high tech, and I want you to elaborate on just how differently folks manage in that environment and how that can positively impact your role as governor of the state. You're listening to the Coalition on AM Talk Radio 790, coalitionradio.us. We'll be back with Ken Block right after the break.
Manchester 65 is New England's newest live music and events venue. If you're not completely enjoying your current live music experience, there is another option. Manchester 65 is large enough to support touring acts, yet small enough for that local feel. For upcoming events, go to manchester65.com. Make it your place. manchester65.com.
The Battery, modern-day fire, powering everything from remote-control cars to the car in your garage. So when your car battery is reaching the end of the line, or you're wondering whether it is, stop by Advance Auto Parts. We'll test your old one for you, free of charge. And if you purchase a new Autocraft battery, we'll install it for free. Only if you'd like us to, of course. Advance Auto Parts. Let's get you back to the garage.
Most vehicles, most locations. See store for details.
Use your unique talent to help end hunger. The 1 of 52 Hunger Network is a grassroots movement that allows you, as an individual, to have a major impact on ending hunger. No fees, only action in just 1 week a year. Join this Strength in Numbers network at oneof52.net. Do you have an upcoming party, gathering, or social event? Want experienced mobile sound entertainment? Then contact DJ Psycho Eddie. Having worked with several local and national acts, as well as charities, nonprofits, and the area's best live event venues, DJ Psycho Eddie can get the party started and keep it going. Contact DJ Psycho Eddie today at 401-338-0787 for a free consultation, or look for DJ Psycho Eddie on Facebook.
We're back. The Coalition on AM 790 Talk Radio, coalitionradio.us. You can find us on Facebook.com/coalition_radio. We're back. We're honored to have Ken Block, Republican nominee for the gubernatorial race here in Rhode Island. Before the break, as a radio professional, I started to ask the big question of the day. So we're kind of laughing. One of the things I want to touch on is management technique. Again, our obsession with all things political and all things based on the race, we seem to forget that once the election is over, oh my God, I'm the governor. And then we forget in our consideration in leading up to the race just how important it is for the individual manager to then be able to successfully govern. So, I talked about the collaborative nature of tech. You come from a very different model than, say, other quote-unquote Republican businessmen / executives. Talk about that and how effective that can be in managing really an opposition party.
Yeah, so I'm a small business owner as well as a tech person. So what that means, practically speaking, for me is I'm a software engineer. I'm a database expert. I will make the coffee. I will sweep the floor, and if I have to, I'll plunge the toilet. Right? I mean, that's what a small business owner does, and I'm taking that practical can-do mentality into government. And frankly, we're running our campaign largely the way that I would plan on governing, because for me, the campaign should be an audition for the job. So we were out in front of the state police barracks 2 weeks ago, and we held a press conference talking about the need to consolidate our 911 dispatch services across the state. All 911 calls are answered at the state police barracks, and then they're transferred to redundant dispatch centers all over the state, which is crazy, wasteful, and the way most states don't do it. The week before that, we were in front of the DMV. And we were in front of the DMV because it's broken. It's one of the worst examples of broken government we have in this state. I mean, in most other states, you don't have to pack a snack and a lunch to go get your driver's license. But in Rhode Island, that's what's needed. In fact, our government actually lies to us about how long you have to wait in line. Their website says you wait about an hour and a half, and when you talk to people in the front of the DMV, when they walk out the door, how long you been there, the answer is 2.5, 3 hours. This is not acceptable. This is not the kind of services that our tax dollars should be paying for. And I'm the guy that fixes broken things. So I'm in this not because I want to have a cool-sounding job on my resume. I already have a cool-sounding job. I'm in this because I see things that are broken. I've seen a void in leadership in this state. And to be perfectly blunt about it, the state needs to be modernized and professionalized. We have processes in place, and you'll appreciate this. A huge number of our state employees fill out a paper-based time card every week, still. Can you imagine any other large organization on the planet still putting pen on paper to track time? We estimate the cost of this to be about $20 million a year. I mean, we have to take a stab at it because it's really hard to do this without being inside. Now, the State Department of Transportation says they need $40 million a year over 10 years to fix all the bridges that are falling down. And I know if you head north on 114 here, just before you get down to 195, you drive over a bridge in East Providence, that's held up by the biggest set of Lego blocks you've ever seen, right? Gigantic stacks of wood hold that bridge up over Route 6. And it's been like that for 10 years. And our Department of Transportation doesn't have the $40 million annually it needs to fix bridges like that. And we have those sorts of bridges all over the state. I just found you $20 million that we can use to actually fund bridge repair in this state. And that's a colossal difference from what the Democrats will say. They'll just say, we're going to fix the bridges.
How do you get, though, in a state like Rhode Island where you've got a supermajority working against you? And I think we can all agree it's not just they're not working against Ken Block personally, just at a craven self-interest, they're working extensively for themselves. So in order to move this battleship, I talk about collaboration, I talk about management techniques. What's been lacking for 20-plus years in this state is a personality or a leader who can actually move that battleship in the right direction. I don't know, maybe battleship is probably a good term for it. Garbage barge is probably a better term for it. But how do you get them to all of a sudden have a deathbed conversion to responsible government?
I don't think they have the conversion, but they're still they're able to be shown the light. And what I mean by that is everybody said the master lever was something that is a change that could never be made in Rhode Island for practical reasons.
Right.
There were a great many. The conventional wisdom said there's a lot of Democrats who believe it helps keep them in power, so therefore they're never going to get rid of it. And for 50 years, that was essentially true. The difference when I really got involved and said that, let's try it all differently, was we brought popular pressure to bear on the General Assembly, and that's something you don't see all that often. Instead of 10 people testifying to get rid of the master lever, there was more than 100. And tens of thousands of emails were launched at the General Assembly leadership and the governor. And in 2 short years, we did the impossible. I mean, I was on Cianci's show this past November, and we were talking about the upcoming effort for the master lever, and he said, "Block, you'll never get rid of the master lever." And I said, "You want to bet?" And we bet, and he lost. Right? He was 100% certain that we couldn't get rid of the master lever, but we did. And that's the model. That's how I'm going to get the hard things done in the General Assembly. I, as a standalone human being, cannot convince 113 to do what they're not necessarily inclined to do. But if I can bring 300 people into the State House because I can use the bully pulpit and the media accessibility of the governor's office in the right way, get people to care about issues, get them all spun up, and get them to show up. That's how you make the kind of change that we need to make in this state. And when people show up at the State House, things happen.
So I see you as the person leading with the torches and the pitchforks?
My job is to get people to pick up the torches and the pitchforks and then bring them into the State House.
How do you generate that personal level of outrage? I've always claimed that politics needs to be personal, that you need to look upon some of these people not as a politician, but as the guy breaking into your house stealing your new flat screen. How do you did it successfully as master lever. When you get into the more arcane issues of budgeting, what's the mechanism you use? I mean, how do you gin up that level of pain?
Well, so you have to pick your issues, and you have to understand which constituencies you're going to bring in. We need to fundamentally change the unemployment insurance system in Rhode Island. The way we run our system is one of the worst in the country in terms of rankings. I need a law change to get that passed. So to get that done, I need to rally up 300-plus business owners. I need to get them furious at the cost of unemployment insurance here relative to other states. I'm going to quantify to them some of the worst aspects of this program, educate them, get them to care, then get them to show up. That's just an example. At the DMV, in the month of June, Rhode Islanders spent an aggregate of 2.4 years waiting in line. 2.4 years. That's more than 21,000 hours. Okay? That's a rallyable issue. Now, of course, I don't need a law change to get that dealt with. That's something that's achievable simply within the executive branch. By the way, a $15 million computer project to replace the 1980s computers in the DMV, and the project is 8 years late now and overdue. It's an outrage that we have a government program that's that pathetic, and we haven't taken any corrective action on it that I can see.
The DMV should be an easy sell. Just say, go to the DMV.
Well, look, I mean, the solution to our woes at the DMV is really simple. I don't go to the DMV. I go to AAA. Right. It's the best $50 I spend every year to not have to wait in line to take care of these basic transactions.
And the people are actually, get this, when you go there and you get your service, they're actually pleasant.
Right.
Well, a lot of that speaks to the people that you're going to put in charge of respective agencies. Under the current administration, the one that's implored you to trust them, that you could take it to the bank, essentially, and by the way, I always found irony in the fact that our current governor spent so much of his time in the Senate taking on George W. Bush, when in fact his behavior as appointing leaders for the state was exactly like that of George W. Bush. He basically hired all his parents, his parents' cronies
and frat buddies.
What steps are you? What again? Using more modern management techniques. What steps are you going to take to look outside the state? God, what would Buddy call it? An intergalactic job search? But how are you going to find the type of people you need to create this sort of change in culture?
We're going to be looking far and wide for people, but people are already coming to us for a simple reason. Because we're coming into government to make really big change, and there are some good people that want to be part of that. For example, in the Department of Labor and Training, and as an employer, I've never had a positive experience with them. And every time I ask a room full of people, raise your hand if you had a good experience with the Department of Labor and Training. No one has, employer or employee. There are two programs that are going to be fundamentally changed under my administration in there: unemployment insurance and temporary disability insurance. Between those two programs, we're going to recover $2/3 of $1 billion over 4 years. There's a number of aggressive individuals who want to be in charge of that. Who wouldn't, right? I mean, it's a career-changing and making job opportunity. We are going to fundamentally change government. I'm going to bring the people into government with me to make those changes.
Let's talk about, for a few minutes, how we pay for things here in the state of Rhode Island. You touched on it a little bit before when you talked about transportation. One of the few successes I would give to the Carcieri administration was what I thought at the time was the elimination of what we call aids to cities and towns. In aids to cities and towns was this sort of mythical, magical number, this amount of money that was given out, doled out, if you will, based on who knows what formula. And the notion was, of course, that this wasn't taxpayer money. This was pixie dust money. That somehow this didn't come from the same people that we were giving it back to. Now, I thought that was gone. And, if you're a libertarian, first of all, that's redistribution at its best. At worst, it's a blanket arrangement to eliminate any level of managerial accountability for the money that's being spent at the city. Because ultimately, cities like Providence and Cranston could just spend whatever they want because they would just get more aid to cities and towns. Now, I thought that was gone. Now, you were here in these studios just a few weeks ago on the John Laughlin show on Saturday mornings, and you had a debate against your primary opponent. And what I was astonished to find out was that the city of Cranston, because it's such a troubled urban blight, tell that to the Real Housewives of Cranston fighting for a spot at Paparazzi on a Saturday night, that they were getting exponentially more money than other cities and towns. How can that be? And what is the right way to fund cities, towns, and as a result, also capital expenditures? How would Ken Block do it?
Yeah. Whether you're spending local taxpayer dollars or state taxpayer dollars, it's still ultimately taxpayer dollars.
Right.
And my strongly held personal belief is that neither local governments nor state governments are doing a particularly fine job at spending taxpayer dollars as carefully as taxpayers would spend their own money. There's plenty of evidence of inefficiencies at the local levels. Most of our communities procure their own emergency vehicles separate and apart from every other community. We have the town of Lincoln, Rhode Island, is the poster child for me of inefficiency when it comes to fire protection services. There are, get this, it's a 20,000 person community. They have 6 different fire departments in Lincoln. They have 6 chiefs. They have 6 chiefs' vehicles. Lincoln's landlocked. Do you know how many fireboats they have up in Lincoln? Okay. The city by the sea, the city of Newport has a single fireboat. Lincoln, Rhode Island's got 3.
Lincoln Woods.
Right? I mean, this is what's wrong, right? Everyone's got their own little personal fiefdom going. And it kills us. Do you know if you're a contractor working at the high school in Lincoln, you've got to pull a permit from 6 different fire chiefs to do that work. Right? That's government run amok. Completely run amok. And that's a symptom. That drives local property taxes in a big way. All this different kind of inefficiency is something that we can't stand for anymore. It's one of the things that I'm going to drive everybody to. We have to consolidate. We have to be much smarter about the way we spend our money.
We're live on the Coalition, AM 790 Talk Radio. We'll be back with more Ken Block in just a few moments.
Attention gardeners, farmers, growers, homesteaders, and horticulturalists. Coming soon to 1889 Post Road in Warwick, Rhode Island, it's The Grow Store. For all your indoor gardening supplies, it's The Grow Store. Mike's Professional Tree Service offers top-of-the-line tree removal, trimming, stump grinding, stump removal, and so much more. Mike's Professional Tree Service will do everything to safeguard your home and property and is fully licensed and insured. Call them today at 401-823-7485 for a free estimate on tree service, tree removal, trimming, and tree care. That's 401-823-7585. Mike's Professional Tree Service are the tree experts serving all of Rhode Island. Online at mikesprotree.com. That's mikesprotree.com. Attention gardeners, farmers, growers, homesteaders, and horticulturalists. Coming soon to 1889 Post Road in Warwick, Rhode Island, it's The Grow Store. For all your indoor gardening supplies, it's The Grow Store. Midday Records is a label that is comprised of local artists and exists for the sole purpose of helping other local artists find new opportunities and to help build a more thriving New England music scene. Midday Records hosts the area's fastest-growing music-related networking event, the Midday Social, books Midday Records presents shows throughout New England, releases compilations featuring local music, promotes bands through the Midday blog, are the co-founders of Music for Pause, and has recently started an artist development and management division. Stay up to date with Midday Records by checking them out on your favorite social media site like Facebook and Twitter, and find them online at middayrecords.com. That's middayrecords.com.
We're back on the Coalition Talk Radio, AM 790, your source for news, talk, and business. Again, you can find us online at coalitionradio.us, facebook.com/coalition_radio. We're on the mighty Twitter. By the way, we've got, how many likes do we have on Facebook? We're cruising towards 500, right?
You are, P.O., you are huge on Facebook.
I am huge everywhere. Of course, we've got in studio Ken Block, Republican nominee for governor. When last we broke, we were talking about how do we pay for things. So let's get into a few specifics. The highways. We touched on it earlier in the show. You know, the Chafee administration, the name that shall not be named on this show, essentially has spent all sorts of money researching whether or not we should all have taximeters on our cars, whether we should be using satellite links to measure how much we're driving and send us bills at home, all sorts of crazy stuff. Ken, how do we pay for the highway? I mean, we have what should be a socialist workers' paradise in this state, where we're taxed to death. And yet we have garbage for municipal services. The dichotomy is astonishing, yet people cling to this as if their life depended on it. How do we pay for this stuff? What's the better way to do it?
Well, there's no question in my mind that we are overtaxed. In the last 2 years, our budget has increased $1 billion. How does the budget increase $1 billion over 2 years, and you still don't have any money? It defies belief. Now, we collect a lot of money that are vehicle fee related, whether it's DMV fees, the gasoline tax, and too many of those fees are diverted to other purposes. So the first thing you have to do is quantify how much those fees are. What does it add up to, and where is it going? If it's not going to roads and bridges, in all likelihood it's being misspent. So let's pull it all back. Let's figure out how much it is, and let's purpose it for where it needs to go. And don't forget that earlier, one of the most basic things, one of the most basic changes that can be made in our government is getting the paper timesheets out of the way. By the way, 15,000 sheets of paper is a stack of paper 5 feet tall. Right? That comes up to my chin. And that's what we do every week with paper timesheets in the state of Rhode Island. $20 million could be repurposed to fixing up our roads and bridges. So if the money isn't there, we can find it that way. There's a more interesting story that I really want to tell you here. In the 2010 race, I listened very, very, very carefully to everything all the candidates said, and the one thing that was missing, completely missing from Governor Chafee, was any kind of coherent message about what he was going to do about the economy. There was nothing, right? There was also nothing for roads or bridges or any of it. And now he's been in there for the better part of 4 years and hasn't done anything. And it shouldn't be a surprise to anybody, because if you come into the office without any workable, viable ideas, the likelihood you're going to find them all of a sudden once you get into the office is kind of laughable. And that's a gigantic contrasting difference between me and everybody else. There's not enough hours between now and midnight to give you all the specifics of all the different plans that I have to fix Rhode Island and how to pay for it. In a nutshell, the most important thing that we have to do is we have to be economically competitive. We have to compete well against Massachusetts. The jobs are there and they're not here.
I heard you mention the other day, and you were comparing and contrasting Massachusetts and Rhode Island. I happen to live on the northeasternmost tip of Rhode Island. I can see better schools, lower taxes, safer roads, literally 150 yards from my house.
Yeah.
You talked about it being in the air. Would it be simple enough just to copy what they're doing?
Well, it would be great if that's the case. The problem is Massachusetts took a certain number. It took a long time to get where they are. Right. I mean, Governor Weld started that process. He inherited a financial crisis. They were Taxachusetts back then.
They're a 30-year overnight success.
Yeah, and so the challenge we have here is we have far less efficient government in a whole bunch of areas. We have to dig all that out, and we have to make it better. As we do that, we can begin to lower the tax burden, and that is where we're going to become competitive. But I will tell you something that we can do to fire up the 195 land right now. So we have 20 acres in the heart of downtown Providence. If those 20 acres were in the heart of Boston, there would be a war between the developers, who was going to build a bigger tower. Here, they're running away from it. So we can change that dynamic. It doesn't cost us a dime. Let's define that as a special economic development zone. Let's make it a 2% 2% corporate tax zone.
Mm-hmm.
And Providence has to also make it a 2% property tax zone. If you do those two changes, you've obliterated the biggest obstacles to businesses looking to locate here, and all of a sudden we would see tremendous interest on that land, which is exactly the shot in the arm we need right now. So one of my high priorities is going to be to get that done, get that land made a special zone, and let's get those buildings going.
So are you saying that bringing more people, more money, more investment into downtown might turn Providence around?
It's an important step. There's a few other things that have to happen there as well.
There you go. Hey, by the way, do you find any dark irony in the fact that two of your opponents in this campaign, when I look across both parties, are both mayors of two of the most mismanaged cities in the state?
It kind of has me smiling every night when I go to bed, to be honest with you.
That perhaps they should be, what's the old term, stick to their own knitting first?
Right.
We've only got a few minutes left. I could spend hours talking to you. This is great. So we call what we call the lightning round. I'm just going to hit you with a couple of different issues and just give me your initial reaction to it. The pension issue. It's sitting out there. Susan Taft Carter is awaiting at any moment. I'm wondering if she's timing her announcement till Election Day. But what happens if the pension case blows up?
Well, if the pension case blows up, I think we see a couple of communities tumble into receivership almost immediately.
Mm-hmm.
It's a disaster for municipalities. It's a disaster for Rhode Island. Well, of course, her ruling is only one step in a protracted legal battle, so I need to take that all back. If she rules adversely against the pension reform, that's just the first step of several before something specifically happens that would have a negative impact. But if it goes all the way through and the highest court in the state eventually rolls it back, we're all in very, very deep trouble.
Kneecap. Was that a tempest in a teapot? What do you think about testing?
Look, when we hand a high school diploma to a child who has a 6th grade level of achievement, it cheapens the diploma, it cheapens the efforts of other children who have earned the diploma, and I think it's important to make sure that the achievement matches the diploma. That being said, when a high-stakes test of a junior or a senior in high school shows you that the child has a 6th grade level of achievement, the only thing you've learned is that you've blown it. So what we have to do, along with the high-stakes testing, is we have to solve the problem of why children are getting into high school so far behind, and that involves rolling it all the way back to kindergarten and doing a lot of testing in kindergarten, identifying the children at risk, applying the time, energy, and resources necessary to bring those kids up to speed, something that both Florida and Ohio are doing with spectacular results.
Excellent. Gambling. The state's got an unholy reliance on gambling. It's a real question whether or not, whether casinos will be able to proceed in Massachusetts, even though ground is broken for one already. How do we get the state off the crack that is gambling revenue?
The problem, first of all, I agree with you. Gambling is not a long-term solution for Rhode Island. It's at best short-term at this point. The problem is we're as addicted to it as crack, and unfortunately we need it as badly as we need air and water. We need to fire up our economy as quickly as we can, because when the mass casinos come, and they're going to come, I mean, there's no doubt in my mind we're going to see them, we're going to be in a world of hurt when those mass casinos show up. Constitutional Convention. Oh, I'm all over it. We need the governor's light-out and veto. 44 other states empower their governors with the light-out and veto. We don't. Absolutely necessary to do. Do you fear that the special interests, as some would claim, would attempt to hijack the Constitutional Convention? No, because there's a 3-step process. The convention has to approve him, and ultimately they have to go on the ballot individually and voted on by the population of Rhode Island. I trust the voters of Rhode Island. They're not hungry to make gigantic, earth-shaking changes in our Constitution. This past week we've really, once again, been treated to how much of a failure ethics is in this state. Is the prohibition against representative involvement in governmental business, is that something that should be constitutional, or do you trust the Ethics Commission, or do you trust the legislative process to fix that? There's actually a law that prevents elected leaders from, reps and senators in particular, from participating in state contracting. So the law was violated. The state didn't enforce its own law. We see that, unfortunately, time and time again. And as far as the Democratic chairman resigning and all, that whole big mess in general, every night I go to bed thankful for the mayors, and every morning I wake up and I'm just thankful for politics in Rhode Island. There you go. RIPTA. Any comments on RIPTA? What do we do? That's a real problem for me. RIPTA is a gigantic problem because it doesn't really get the job done that we need done. It's not overly convenient to take public transportation right now. When public transportation is not convenient, it's not getting the job done in the way you need it to do. I don't have a specific answer for that one yet. We're going to have to dive into that heavily and figure it out. Okay. The Republican Party in this state, clearly it's been a divisive campaign, a lot of personal attacks, a lot of, not coming from your campaign, by the way, to make that clear. How do you rebuild the brand, the Republican Party, given the opportunity as the head of the Republican Party? I mean, I really am very much looking forward to that. The Republican Party needs to be the party of fix. It needs to be the party of getting things done. We're going to make it the solutions-oriented party. We're going to work this state out, and we're going to become a force to be reckoned with. Ken Block on the Coalition on Talk Radio. Ken, thank you so much for coming in. Thank you for being the accessible candidate. Again, coalitionradio.us. You can find us on Facebook.com/coalition_radio. We'll see you next week. Thank you.